What draws us underground? Perhaps it is the oldest instinct we carry, the urge to follow a shadow to its source, to stand at the mouth of the earth and wonder what has been waiting there long before our names, our maps, or our certainty. Across every continent, people have told stories about openings in the ground that were more than holes in stone. They were thresholds. Some were feared as entrances to the underworld. Some were guarded as sacred places. Others became the subject of rumor, science, devotion, and doubt. A farmer breaks through a basement wall and finds a buried city. A miner uncovers a chamber of crystals that glows like frozen light. A diver descends into a blue shaft where the bottom is not an end, but a beginning. Again and again, the pattern repeats. A dark opening, a human witness, and the unsettling realization that the world below may be larger, stranger, and more complete than the world above. We like to think of modern life as illuminated. Satellites cross the sky, roads divide the land into neat lines. The visible world has been named, measured, photographed, and stored in databases. Yet beneath that confidence lies another reality, one that has never fully submitted to us. Under forests, deserts, ice, mountains, and towns, the planet keeps vast interior spaces where time moves differently. In those chambers, species survive without sunlight. Ancient rituals linger in stone. Air, water, and silence shape worlds that human eyes were never meant to see often, and never meant to understand easily. This is not a story about monsters hiding underground, nor about easy answers dressed as mystery. It is about the places that test the border between knowledge and imagination. The caves that follow are real, legendary, or suspended somewhere in between. But all of them reveal something true about us, that discovery is never just about what we find. It is also about what we are willing to believe and what remains beyond belief, waiting in the dark. What if the first doorway was not a cave at all, but a rumor so vivid it began to feel like geography? In the late 1990s, a voice on late-night radio described a hole in the dry country near Ellensburg, Washington. It was said to be old, older than ownership, older than memory. Locals had treated it as a place where things disappeared. Broken appliances, trash, dead animals. Nothing, according to the story, ever struck bottom. The pit did not answer with sound. It answered with silence. The man who told the story said curiosity became obsession. He lowered line into the darkness, more and more of it, until the measurement itself lost meaning. No end came back. Then the tale grew stranger, bending away from geology and toward folklore. There were claims of animals returned to life, of unnatural light, of officials suddenly interested in land that had once seemed forgettable. The details were impossible to verify. That, of course, only made them harder to forget. Skeptics have long treated the account as performance, a piece of American myth assembled from fear, loneliness, and the seductive power of an unseen depth. And perhaps that is exactly what it is. Yet stories like this endure for a reason. They gather around places where knowledge fails and imagination rushes in to fill the space. A bottomless hole is not just a physical anomaly, it is a symbol of all the places where measurement stops and unease begins. Whether the pit ever existed in the way it was described matters less than what it revealed about the people listening. We are drawn to openings that refuse explanation. We want the world to be knowable but not fully known. Somewhere between hoax and haunting lies a deeper truth. Once a dark place enters the mind, it can become as real as stone. And the question remains, when we stare into an unexplained depth, are we searching for the Earth's secrets or our own? It began, as many revelations do, with an accident too ordinary to seem important. In 1963, a man renovating his home in the Turkish region of Cappadocia knocked through a wall and found empty space behind it. At first, it may have looked like nothing more than a forgotten cavity in old stone. But as the opening widened, a hidden world emerged. Passageways led to rooms. Rooms opened into corridors. Those corridors descended into a vast underground city now known as Derinkuyu, a place large enough to shelter thousands of people beneath the earth. Down there were stables, kitchens, storage chambers, chapels, wells, and ventilation shafts engineered with a precision that still inspires admiration. Entire communities once moved through those carved levels, carrying fear, faith, and routine into the dark. Historians believe the city was expanded over centuries and used as a refuge during times of invasion or unrest. What appears from above as a quiet landscape of rock and wind concealed a human answer to danger. If the surface became uncertain, life could continue below. There is something moving in that design. Derinkuyu was not built as a monument. It was built so families might survive. Its genius lies not only in engineering, but in tenderness disguised as practicality. Someone thought about air, water, food, worship, and the movement of animals. Someone imagined children sleeping underground while war passed overhead. Even in hiding, people made room for dignity. And yet the city also unsettles us. We like ruins when they sit under sunlight, open to the sky, softened by grass. But this is different. Derinkuyu asks us to picture whole lives unfolding out of sight, in stone chambers where time must have felt close and heavy. It reminds us that civilization is not always built upward in towers and triumph. Sometimes it bends inward, becoming quieter, more defensive, more fragile. Perhaps that is why the discovery feels so haunting. Beneath an ordinary home lay a forgotten architecture of endurance. Not a fantasy world, not a legend, a real one, waiting behind a wall, as if history itself had simply stepped aside and held its breath. What happens when the earth opens not into emptiness, but into light? Deep in the Naica mine in northern Mexico, miners searching for lead, zinc, and silver broke into a chamber that seemed to belong to another logic entirely. Inside stood colossal crystals of gypsum, some stretching longer than a bus, angled through the air like pale beams trapped mid-creation. The cave did not feel built. It felt grown, slowly and without witness, over spans of time too large for ordinary intuition. The conditions that shaped it were almost impossibly precise. For hundreds of thousands of years, mineral-rich water remained warm and stable inside the mountain. In that patience, crystal by crystal, the chamber assembled itself. Nothing dramatic, no sudden event, just temperature, chemistry, pressure, and time working together until the result appeared almost supernatural. Science at moments like this does not diminish wonder, it gives wonder a deeper foundation. But the cave was also hostile to human presence. Temperatures soared, humidity pressed close to total saturation. Without protective gear, a visitor could survive only briefly. Researchers entered as if crossing into another planet, carrying breathing systems and cooling suits, aware that beauty and danger were fused there. The crystals looked pure, almost delicate, yet the environment around them made clear that this was never a place meant to welcome us. There is a quiet lesson in that contrast. We often imagine discovery as a form of possession, as though naming a place grants us some lasting intimacy with it. Yet the Cave of the Crystals resists that impulse. It can be studied, photographed, measured, but it cannot be comfortably inhabited. It remains, in an important sense, its own world, one that existed before our arrival and will continue to follow its own physical truths long after we leave. Standing before such forms, people reach for the language of cathedrals. And perhaps that is fitting, not because the cave proves anything mystical, but because it invites the same human response: humility. Some places do not ask us to conquer them. They ask us to notice how small we are and how extraordinary the universe can be when no one is watching. It started with blue water and the confidence of trained miners, the kind of confidence that comes from believing depth can be managed if it is measured carefully enough. Off the coast of Belize, the great blue hole appears from above like an iris set into the sea, a nearly perfect circle of dark water surrounded by bright coral. From the air, it is breathtaking. From the surface, it is almost serene. But as divers descend, the mood changes. Sunlight thins, the walls fall away. The blue deepens into something more ancient and less familiar. What seems at first like a marine wonder begins to feel like an archive written in stone. The hole was formed during earlier ages when sea levels were lower and the area existed as a limestone cave system on dry land. When the ocean rose, the roof collapsed and the chambers flooded, leaving behind vertical space marked by stalactites and submerged ledges. These features tell a quiet story about worlds lost to water, about landscapes transformed so completely that only geology remembers their first shape. The sea did not erase the cave. It preserved it in another language. Divers describe the experience with a mixture of awe and restraint. There are sharks here, yes, and the thrill of encountering them often dominates the public imagination. But the deeper drama is not predatory, it is temporal. To move through the blue hole is to pass through evidence of climates, coastlines, and vanished horizons. It is to feel that the planet has had many versions of itself, and that our own is only the latest draft. That realization can be strangely intimate. We build our lives near shorelines, trusting their outlines as if they were permanent. But the blue hole suggests otherwise. Oceans rise, caves drown. What was once shelter becomes abyss. What was once inland becomes open water. And still we descend, carrying lights into the blue, hoping to understand not just what lies below, but how much of the world is always in the process of becoming something else. Maybe that is why the place lingers in memory. It is beautiful, certainly. But beneath the beauty is a more unsettling truth. The earth is not fixed, and neither are we. We live, all of us, on a surface that has forgotten many of its former selves. What if the most haunting cave is the one that seems to remember us? In the hills of southern France, a narrow opening once led children and their dog into one of the great artistic chambers of human history. Behind that accidental discovery was Lascaux, a cave where painted horses, deer, aurochs, and signs still move across stone with astonishing vitality. These images were made more than 17,000 years ago, yet they do not feel silent. They feel mid-breath, as if the artists had only just set down their tools and stepped back into darkness. The cave does more than preserve pictures. It preserves intention. The walls curve with the bodies of animals. Shadows animate muscle and motion. The painters use the cave's natural shape, allowing stone to become shoulder, flank, and momentum. This was not casual decoration. It was observation sharpened by memory and transformed by imagination. Somewhere in the flicker of a torchlight, people stood in those chambers and gave their inner world a visible form. For modern viewers, the shock comes from recognition. We expect distance from the Paleolithic past. We expect crudeness, perhaps, or a style too remote to touch us. Instead, we encounter grace, discipline, and emotional intelligence. These painters understood rhythm, contour, and the living presence of animals on which survival depended. Their work crosses the abyss of time with disarming ease. It reminds us that ancient people were not waiting to become human. They already were, and yet the cave also teaches fragility. Once open to broad public viewing, the delicate environment began to change. Breath, heat, and microorganisms threatened the paintings, and access had to be restricted. Replicas were created so that wonder could continue without destroying what inspired it. There is a paradox there that feels deeply modern. Our love can endanger the things we most want to keep. Lascaux is often called a window into prehistory, but perhaps it is also a mirror. In those painted walls, we see evidence of fear, reverence, hunger, beauty, and the need to leave a trace. Long before writing, before nations, before the machinery of progress, people entered a cave and made meaning out of darkness. The question that remains is not only what they believed, it is what, after all these years, still binds their hand to ours. The cave did not reveal a city, a treasure, or an ancient painting. It revealed a body of water so still and dark it seemed less like a lake than a held breath. In the mountains of Lebanon, the Jeita Grotto unfolds in chambers shaped by limestone and patience. Stalactites descend like frozen rain. Underground rivers slip through the dark with a kind of calm authority, carving unseen paths long before roads and borders were drawn above. Visitors move through the grotto by foot and by boat, entering a place where sound changes character. Drips become echoes. Silence becomes presence. Even the smallest movement feels amplified, as if the cave is listening back. What makes Jeita remarkable is not a single dramatic feature, but the harmony of its elements. Rock, water, and time exist here in delicate balance. The upper galleries glitter with mineral formations that seem almost ceremonial. Below, the river continues its patient work, providing water that has sustained lives far beyond the cave walls. This is not only a hidden spectacle, it is part of a living system, one in which beauty and utility are inseparable. There is something quietly corrective about that. Modern culture often divides the world into categories: the practical and the poetic, the useful and the sacred. But caves like Jeita dissolve those boundaries. The same place that inspires awe also nourishes cities. The same river that reflects soft light in a cavern may later emerge into daily life, into cups, fields, kitchens, and memory. What feels remote below ground is already part of the ordinary world above us. And still, when people enter such a place, they lower their voices. That instinct matters. It suggests that awe is not only about scale or rarity. Sometimes it comes from encountering a form of order that does not need us. The grotto was not made for our comfort, yet it offers a kind of reassurance. Beneath the noise of history, beneath conflict and ambition, there are systems older than us, patient enough to outlast our certainties. Perhaps that is the real mystery. Not that the bomb hides some impossible world, but that it reminds us how much of life is carried by forces we barely notice. Water in darkness, stone under pressure, time doing its quiet work. And somewhere in that stillness, a question. How often do we mistake what is hidden for what is absent? What if the most unsettling caves are the ones that seem to keep rewriting themselves? In Vietnam's Phong Nha Ke Bang region, explorers entered a limestone world so vast it altered the scale of what a cave could be. Son Doong, now known as one of the largest cave passages on Earth, does not feel like a chamber beneath the ground. It feels like a landscape hidden inside the planet. Its ceilings soar high enough for clouds to gather. Sections of the roof have collapsed so completely that sunlight pours in, feeding pockets of jungle where plants grow, birds call, and mist rises from underground rivers as if the cave were dreaming of becoming a forest. The first response to such a place is usually disbelief. A cave in the imagination is enclosed, narrow, dark. But Son Doong disrupts those assumptions. It contains weather, ecosystems, and a sense of distance usually reserved for canyons or valleys. To walk there is to feel categories break apart. Underground and open air begin to overlap. Isolation and abundance exist side by side. The place refuses to stay inside the neat boundaries language tries to place around it. Geologists can explain much of its formation through water, soluble rock, collapse, and immense spans of time. Yet even with that knowledge, the cave remains emotionally disorienting. It presents a world that seems assembled from contradiction. There are ancient walls and fresh green growth, deep shadow and sudden sun, silence then running water. What appears hidden turns out to contain its own sky. That may be why so many people speak of the cave not simply as a destination, but as an encounter with scale itself. In a life shaped by screens, deadlines, and the manageable dimensions of human design, Son Doong restores a rarer feeling, the sensation of being wonderfully outmatched. Not threatened exactly, repositioned. Returned to a more honest proportion. And perhaps that is the deeper gift of such places. They do not merely expand the map. They expand the mind's sense of what reality can hold. A cave can be a tunnel, a shelter, a tomb, a gallery. But here it is also a weather system, a river corridor, a greenhouse, a hidden valley. The earth, it turns out, is capable of more complexity than our first definitions allow. The question is whether we can learn to meet that complexity with humility rather than control. What if a mountain becomes mysterious, not because of what has been proven, but because of what people keep imagining inside it? Mount Shasta rises from Northern California with the self-possession of a monument. Snow gathers on its upper slopes. Clouds circle it like thought. For generations, the mountain has drawn climbers, pilgrims, writers, and seekers of every kind. Beneath that attraction lies a second layer of fascination, the enduring belief that somewhere inside the volcanic mass, hidden chambers and tunnels might lead to an unseen world. Some of these stories began in indigenous traditions that spoke of powerful presences associated with the mountain. Later, in the 19th and early 20th centuries, those sacred associations were reshaped by outsiders into stranger narratives, secret inhabitants, lost civilizations, luminous beings, underground halls beyond the reach of ordinary maps. Books were written. Witnesses came forward. Certain accounts describe smooth passages and geometric spaces inside the mountain's lava tube systems. None of these claims have been verified in any conclusive way. Geology confirms that caves and volcanic tunnels exist there. The rest remains in the realm of testimony, belief, and cultural projection. That distinction matters. Mountains like Shasta often become mirrors for human longing. People arrive carrying their own questions and leave with stories shaped by what they hoped, feared, or needed to find. A cave entrance in such a place is never just an opening in rock. It becomes a screen onto which entire ideas of hidden wisdom, lost refuge, or alternate history can be cast. The earth stays silent, and the imagination does the talking. Yet it would be too simple to dismiss the stories altogether. Legends survive because they answer emotional truths, even when literal proof is absent. They reveal a desire to believe that beneath the visible world there is still depth, still intelligence, still mystery that has not been flattened by explanation. Mount Shasta may hold only lava tubes and stone, or it may hold something less tangible, but no less real. The evidence that human beings cannot stand before certain landscapes without feeling that they are being observed by something older than themselves. And perhaps that is the deeper cave here. Not one beneath the mountain, but one within us. The chamber where wonder and uncertainty still live side by side. It was supposed to be a system of tunnels. Instead, it became a meditation on disappearance. Beneath the limestone hills of Central Europe, vast cave networks run through rock like unfinished sentences. In some places, they are mapped and illuminated for visitors. In others, they narrow into inaccessible veins where water, mineral, and silence continue their work unnoticed. Among these subterranean worlds, the Moravian karst in the Czech Republic has long inspired a particular kind of unease. Sinkholes open suddenly. Underground rivers vanish and return. And at the center of many stories stands the Macocha abyss, a chasm whose depth seems to gather every human instinct to look down and imagine more than the eye can confirm. For centuries, people treated the abyss as both natural wonder and moral symbol. Legends accumulated around it the way moss gathers on damp stone. Some stories spoke of grief, betrayal, or penance. Others simply focused on the physical fact itself, a drop into darkness, a place where sound arrives late and certainty later still. Early explorers descended with ropes and nerve, trying to turn dread into measurement. Science eventually offered clearer numbers, clearer maps, clearer explanations. But explanation did not dissolve atmosphere. The abyss remained emotionally larger than its dimensions. That is often the power of caves connected to water and vertical space. They remind us that the earth is not solid in the way daily life encourages us to believe. Beneath our feet are voids, channels, collapses, hollows where stone has yielded to time. The ground appears dependable until it does not. One opening in the landscape can quietly undo the illusion of permanence. And yet the abyss is not only a symbol of fear, it is also a symbol of patience. Water shaped it. Gravity revealed it. Generations approached it with different languages of understanding. Folklore, caution, engineering, geology. Each age brought its own torch. None exhausted the place. Perhaps that is why such depths stay with us. They are not merely holes in the earth. They are reminders that beneath every finished map lies an unfinished world. We come to the edge wanting revelation. What we often receive instead is proportion. The abyss does not answer every question. It asks a better one: how much of reality remains hidden, not because it is supernatural, but because depth itself is hard for the human mind to bear. What if the strangest places are not those hidden from history, but those history keeps returning to for different reasons? In the high desert of New Mexico, the entrance to Carlsbad Caverns opens like an afterthought in the earth, modest at first, almost reluctant. But descend into it, and the scale changes all at once. Rooms widen into darkness so broad they feel architectural. Formations rise from the floor like draped fabric, columns, frozen waterfalls. Long before electric lights and guided paths, people entered these chambers with fire, caution, and whatever language they had for awe. The cave's deeper story is written not only in limestone but in absence. This vast space was shaped over immense spans of time by water rich with dissolved minerals, by chemical transformations invisible to anyone standing there now. Later, it became a refuge for bats in astonishing numbers, a seasonal cloud of life emerging at dusk from the same opening that once seemed only to lead downward. Human attention followed many routes into this cave: science, extraction, tourism, reverence, spectacle. Each one revealed something, and each one left something untouched. There is a temptation in places like Carlsbad to think we have already translated wonder into knowledge. The paths are built, the chambers are named. The brochures exist, but naming is not the same as finishing. Even the most visited caverns preserve an inner reserve, a feeling that human order has been laid gently over something much older and less interested in being explained. The lights help us see, but they also remind us how much darkness remains beyond them. Perhaps that is why the evening bat flight has become such a defining image of the place. Creatures emerge from underground in great spiraling motion, not as symbols or omens, but as participants in a rhythm older than our institutions. They turn the cave outward, connecting hidden chambers to open sky, geology to ecology, stillness to movement. The underground is not separate from life above. It is part of the same breathing world, and maybe that is the lesson Carlsbad offers. Mystery does not vanish when a place becomes known. Sometimes it simply changes shape. What was once feared as depth becomes understood as process, habitat, time, interdependence. Yet even then, standing in a chamber large enough to make language feel small, we sense that knowledge has limits. Not because truth is absent, but because some truths arrive best through humility. There are caves that preserve the past, and there are caves that seem to erase the distance between past and present. High in the Altai Mountains of Siberia lies Denisova Cave, modest in appearance when compared with the vast chambers and dramatic abysses that capture the popular imagination. There are no towering crystal halls here, no underground rivers carrying boats through the dark. And yet this small opening in rock has reshaped the story of who we are. From fragments so slight they might once have been overlooked, a finger bone, a tooth, traces of ancient life embedded in sediment, scientists uncovered evidence of a previously unknown group of archaic humans, now called Denisovans. It is difficult to overstate the quiet force of that revelation. For centuries, people searched caves for artifacts, paintings, bones, and clues to vanished worlds. But Denisova Cave offered something different. Not a lost city or a dramatic treasure, but a revision of the human family tree itself. The discovery suggested that our prehistory was not a neat procession of separate species replacing one another in tidy order. It was more tangled, more intimate, more human. Different groups met, overlapped, and left traces of themselves in one another. That insight changes the emotional texture of the past. We often speak of ancient humans as though they were distant strangers, sealed behind glass by time. Yet genetics tells a gentler, more complicated story. Their lives are not merely adjacent to ours. In some cases, they continue within us. The cave becomes not just a site of excavation, but a place where the boundary between then and now grows unexpectedly thin. There is something humbling in the scale of evidence required for such a shift, a scrap of bone, a sequence of DNA. Dust layered over tens of thousands of years. From almost nothing, a whole new understanding emerges. It reminds us that history is not only hidden in monuments and grand ruins. Sometimes it survives in the smallest survivals, waiting for tools and patience to catch up with what stone has been keeping. And so Denisova Cave leaves us with a different kind of mystery. Not the mystery of whether something impossible lies beneath the earth, but the mystery of how much of ourselves remains undiscovered even after we begin to look. We descend into caves hoping to find lost worlds. Sometimes quietly, we find that the lost world is part of us. What if the final threshold is not into the earth, but into the mind that enters it? On the Greek island of Antiparos, there is a cave whose chambers descend in stages, as though the land were teaching the body how to move from daylight into contemplation. Stalactites hang in patient silence. Stone folds inward. For centuries, travelers, nobles, monks, and wanderers left inscriptions there, small signatures against the long anonymity of rock. Each visitor came for a different reason: curiosity, devotion, prestige, escape. But the cave received them all in the same language of darkness, echo, and time. Places like this occupy an unusual space between geology and memory. They are physical sites, measurable and finite, yet they gather meanings that far exceed their dimensions. A cave becomes sacred because people kneel there. It becomes historical because someone important once passed through. It becomes intimate because countless unknown lives carried fear, hope, and wonder into its chambers. The stone remains the same, but the human atmosphere deepens with every generation. That layering matters. When we imagine caves, we often focus on the hidden thing, the buried chamber, the secret tunnel, the impossible formation waiting to be revealed. But by the time a cave enters cultural memory, it is no longer only a natural place. It is a conversation between earth and witness. Every story attached to it, factual, embellished, devotional, mistaken, becomes part of the cave's afterlife. What is hidden below is only half the story. The rest is what the place awakens in those who descend. In that sense, the journey underground has always been psychological as well as physical. Light narrows, sound changes, the familiar world recedes. Whether one stands in a painted sanctuary, a crystal chamber, a flooded shaft, or a lava tube alive with legend, the effect is similar. The cave removes distraction. It asks the oldest questions in a quieter voice. How small are we? How old is this world? What survives of us when our names are gone? By now, after all these descents, a pattern begins to emerge. The strangest places beneath the earth are not strange because they defy reality. They are strange because they reveal how partial our reality has always been. And as we prepare to return to the surface one final time, another thought rises with us. Perhaps every cave is, in the end, a lesson in how to meet the unknown without turning away. In the end, the caves do not give us a single answer. They offer something rarer and perhaps more necessary: perspective. We began with openings in the earth and the old human instinct to follow them. Along the way, we found hidden cities built for survival, crystal chambers shaped by unimaginable patience, flooded voids that remember vanished coastlines, painted walls that carry the breath of ancient minds, and mountains whose legends say as much about longing as they do about stone. Some places revealed hard evidence. Others remained suspended between testimony and metaphor. Yet together they formed one continuous story, not about what lies beneath the ground alone, but about how human beings respond when certainty fades and depth begins. Again and again, the pattern returned. Mystery led to inquiry. Inquiry opened into knowledge. Knowledge, rather than closing the world, made it larger. A cave explained by geology did not become less beautiful. A legend shown to be uncertain did not become meaningless. A fragment of bone in a Siberian chamber did not diminish humanity. It expanded it. The deeper we looked, the more we encountered a truth both scientific and emotional. The unknown is not always a threat. Often it is an invitation. That may be the most enduring lesson these places leave with us. We live in an age that prizes clarity, speed, and immediate conclusions. But the underground asks for a different posture, slower attention, greater humility, a willingness to let mystery remain partially intact while still honoring the discipline of evidence. Between fantasy and fact, between reverence and analysis, there is a middle path where wonder can survive without deception. Perhaps that is why caves have always mattered. They remind us that the world is older than our categories and more subtle than our first impressions. They hold traces of fear, refuge, art, adaptation, imagination, and memory. They tell us that what is hidden is not necessarily lost, and that darkness is not always the opposite of understanding. Sometimes it is the place where understanding begins. So the final question is not what still waits below. There will always be more chambers, more tunnels, more sealed pockets of time. The truer question is what kind of people we become when we stand at the edge of what we do not yet know. Whether we choose conquest or curiosity, certainty or humility, forgetting or care. In that choice, perhaps, lies the deepest cave of all, the human future, still forming in the dark, waiting for the light we bring into it.